Hey there, everyone. This is Alexnder Willette. Today I'll be talking about sequencing and objectives and lesson plans and all that. So the question of today is, in what ways could you vary your teaching techniques to ensure you are reaching all of the various learning styles you may have in your classroom? So basically, I thought of this in two ways. One is with the book, which really helped, and the second is basically how I feel about this. So really, the book talks about sequencing, basically the idea of going through steps that will, in theory, touch on different types of learners. So the first step or sequence or principle is to start with a simple step. So basically, you want to start with something that's like an analogy or a metaphor, something you can connect other things to show the connection, to show that the simplicity of a thing, but to not necessarily hammer in a hard content yet. You don't want to hammer in hard concepts yet. So this basically touches on a lot of different learners, people who can just kind of connect things. And that connection really comes in the second principle when you're using concrete examples, because now you really want to show a serious example of how this is being used in real life. These students are able to connect what they're learning to things in their everyday life. And that will probably help some learners be able to understand this concept a little better. So once you have the first and second principle in there, once you have this concrete and complexity in there, you can now kind of start to push in more complex questions and more complex content, because now these learners are starting to get it, and the learners who kind of require more complexity for things are now able to understand it through adding complexity. The fourth and final principle they recommend is basically to include abstractions. So basically at this point you want to have an idea of, okay, let's see, the book says, when you are sick, why does the doctor start an examination by checking your blood pressure and listening to your heartbeat? You want to question it. These are for learners who can really take from their environment, question their environment. And I think personally it's a really helpful strategy for being able to what did you get out of it? What did you learn from that? Just going personally on this question, I think one way you could vary your teaching techniques basically is to just, in my opinion, you want to kind of feed from the room. So when I was doing my observation period, I was allowed to teach a few classes because the teacher thought I was doing good. So I did. And one thing I found is that every class period, you kind of want to see what's going on. You want to check up with the students, see what they're learning, make sure that they're listening. If they're not listening, you want to try something new. One thing I found was I was lecturing too much. It helped for some students, but in an on-level class, they're so tired of lecturing, they're going to tune out like that. I know I do sometimes in some classes. So that's just how it is. So what I find is that I think sequencing actually really helps with that, because you're not only just lecturing. You're adding these concepts in, and you're kind of changing how you do it, and you start small and you build up. There's structure to it. I think structure is way more important than just lecturing. I think some lecturing can be good, but there are some pros and cons to it, of course. Okay, so for part 2, the question is, what is your main takeaway about learning objectives and lesson planning that you learned from this module in our course? What advantages or disadvantages does the concept of thinking styles have compared to learning styles? So basically, what I got from here is the main takeaways. This seems personal at first. My main takeaway from planning is basically when you're a teacher, you want to have a set objective of what you're going to teach. And your lesson plan, it should be the guide that will get you to that objective. The objective is the finish line. The guide is your plan to get up there. Your lesson plan is to get up there. Personally, what I'm finding is that it's really hard to set these objectives sometimes. It's hard to make the lesson plan. And that's my main takeaway is it is difficult. People don't think it's difficult until you start it. But it doesn't always have to be difficult. I think it's a learning process. I think these kind of tips help with using the sequencing is really helpful. Sequencing is very helpful for planning as well. Graphic organizers, which I'll get into, just to help you keep organized. Organization is what I'm finding is really helpful as well. The book gives some really great examples of some really great organizers. You have hierarchies and stuff. This looks a little complex, but I thought I'd at least show it of an example of something that would be an organizer for keeping organized. So basically, I wrote here, I'm just going to read out to you. So I said, the lesson plan should be structured in a way that allows room for different kinds of thinkers. For example, a good lesson plan should have a little lecture, a little group activity, a little demonstration, a little review, And with this, the teacher creates a class period that caters to all types of learners. And I think that's what's important. Is it's going to be hard to cater all those different types of students, but through time and through thought, you'll be able to get that. The second part of this question, and it was difficult, I won't even lie. What advantages or disadvantages does the concept of thinking styles have compared to learning styles? So I had a little difficulty here, but I think I got it. Basically, a thinking style, there are two types of thinkers. You can be deductive or inductive. Deductive is you think generally and then go to specific, and inductive is you start specific and then you can think more generally. My thought here is that the advantage to this is obviously there's like different students can think different ways. And different students can have a different idea of how to approach things. And you as a teacher can go to them and kind of cater to every individual student through like, okay, you can do a little deductive reasoning practice here, and then, okay, we're going to have a little inductive idea here. So like maybe you can one day start a topic generally and go to specific, and then the next topic, like the next period, you do specific and go general. I can think of many, so you can start with the idea of Pearl Harbor and then broaden out into the idea of Americans' involvement in World War II. The next class, you can start focusing on, let's see, the Cold War and broaden down into something like 1960, was it 62, 63, the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, there's different ways you can focus on something like that. And I think that's really cool that we're learning about that. A disadvantage of this, of course, is that you have a lot of different learners. You have someone with a different thinking style and different learning styles are going to be harder to cater to. I hope I got that question. In case I didn't, I also wanted to answer another one. So I like the one about graphic organizers. What graphic organizer could you use to present concepts in your subject area of teaching? How do graphic organizers work for children? So graphic organizers, in my opinion, they help present. I have to go quick. They help present concepts and they help visualize it. You can look at a graphic organizer. I make a little lesson plan, study plan every day. Where I basically just put the times. I know it's a little scrappy. And I put what I have to do and all that. It's really helpful for me to organize what I'm thinking about and organize how I see it so then I can remember it. So I could just throw this away and probably tell you what I have to do next. And I think that's helpful for concepts as well, because you can look at this concept, like, for example, this. I think this is a little too complex in my opinion, but that's just me. And it really helps you visualize it and almost memorize it. And I think it helps for students because it helps them, they can write it, they can draw it, and they can it almost can keep them like they're in control, if you understand what I'm saying. And that's basically what I'm getting at here, is it can keep you in control and can keep you motivated to get it done. Just making sure I got done. Looks like I did. Okay, thank you everyone, and have a great day.